Just making sure it's streaming to YouTube.
Nice, nice.
Okay. You should be able to see now.
Yeah, man. I'm in your screen now.
Okay. All right, let's get into it. So, what we're doing first, well, last week um, we did uses of perspective. And now we are in week 3, which is going to be, get out of here, get out of here, basic composition. Oh my goodness. So what we want to cover in this lesson is theme application, basic composition, and taking a box sketch and applying a theme to it. So we'll start. We're going to want to cover things like rule of thirds, big, medium, small, shape grouping, paths, midground, background, foreground, all that. Then we will do theme application, which is number 1, creating reference boards. And 2, applying a theme to an original composition. Okay, that should be that. And now I can reference that when we need to. Okay, so basic composition, we'll start with rule of thirds. And also talk about different canvas aspect ratios. So when we talk about composition, composition is basically composing things together in a way that leads the eye to an intended purpose. So if we have a canvas, and it can be anything that we want to lead the eye to, maybe, it's a sun, or it's a specific thing that someone is holding, and they've got this, and they're holding it with 2 arms, and we want to make sure that everything in an image supports the general idea that we want the viewer to be able to see, and we want that to happen quickly. When we think about how to compose, there's multiple different ways to do it. We can start with dividing things into thirds. So if we go horizontally by thirds, and if we split vertically by thirds, we can have the reason this is something that we want to do, and Nathan Fowkes has a video on the Schoolism YouTube channel where he talks about why we don't typically want to add things on the far sides here. For me, I think it's because one, when we look at things, we are naturally focusing all of our vision in this area. And so doing anything outside of this feels unintended or out of vision. But two, it also has an effect of space. So when you put things on the edge and you've got a big scene and you're drawing stuff out, and you have your main guy over here and he's not on a, and you don't have what you want to focus on in the third, it almost has a pushing effect where it feels like it's being crowded out. And that can have a desirable idea behind it, but if the main point is for a general showcase or method of purpose, then taking any of these intersections is usually generally recommended. The cool thing that I've seen before is, yeah, this will get boring after a while, right? So maybe you've got a house or a building here, and you've got your guy here. You see a lot of concept art that way. If you want to switch things up a little bit, you can also take one of these areas and maybe you divide it again. Maybe you have a secondary canvas of your general placement, and you can divide this into thirds. Now you have other points that if you were, like in a small scale, maybe you want to put your birds for scale, somewhere over here rather than here. And you can take any plot and divide it that way and start thinking about where you might want to organize placements of things. Of course, we've also got stuff like the golden ratio, which, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't often just use it, but it starts with something like this, right? Let's pull it up. Okay. The interesting thing that I'm seeing here is that it is a subdivision of what I view to almost be thirds. So this is 2/3, this is 1/3, and it's spiraling each way. Good way to remember it, at least. Resulting in a curve that can be followed like so. And all this is you can repurpose this however you want. It's like a more directed method of rule of thirds. You can almost think of it that way. Because if you flip this vertically, then your main point is now in the rule of thirds section there. But if you wanted to, anything else that you drew in your scene can have this flow to it that leads the eye. So maybe you've got a foreground element here with your dude and your stuff. Things happen, and it eventually comes there. You can divide in other ways, so I'm pretty sure I've seen something like a composition for like a triangle. Let's find it. I think it may be this, the golden triangle. When you divide this like so, you end up with two intersection points that are closer together in this manner, and then you can also take advantage of leading lines like this. But one of the best uses that we can always refer back to is Edgar Payne. Hopefully I've got the right name. And this can be our holy Bible of rules of composition. Things that he mentions here, let's fix this first. Are different manners of composing landscapes, but we can always take that and apply it to any scene that we want. Whoops. Okay, that's enough. We've got stuff here. When we look over, he's got stuff like pyramid composition, which is a triangle. And so when he talks about elements of a landscape, you may have a tree here, and a cloud. Altogether, you're going to have a triangle that leads your 3 points. Some of the other ones that you'll want to take note of are things like, let's see if it's in here, rail yard, the steel yard. The steel yard is, let's see, off to the right here, and that is weight. That's the concept of weight in a canvas, where you might have a large tree plus smaller elements over here in some way. The way that it works out is that you have what feels evenly balanced. So if you have something, if you think about physics and you've got a scale that is balanced on a single point, you put something heavy, you generally want to keep that close to the center. That way you can easily balance it, and counterweights will need to be placed farther to the side. So if I were to adjust this, I may have it more like that, closer to the center, smaller element to the side here. Other ones are things like the circle composition, and this can be, it doesn't even have to be just a flat circle. That would imply more of like a aerial view, looking down or looking right at a cave, that sort of thing. But if you think about a lake, which he has as an example, this is a circle in perspective, which is the main area of focus, and all leading lines come back around to looking in this area. If you were thinking about your rule of thirds as well, maybe you would want to put like a ship or some tree, something like that in that area. Other good ones are the tunnel composition. What I like about this one is that it can almost be viewed as a framing device, since it's looking through something at another. You can have guys here. Maybe there's a cart with a little horse at the end pulling it. And everything is going to reinforce looking down this area. Let's see. We have L composition, which would be purposefully placing something vertically and then a thin areas elsewhere, but you can also think about inverting this and working with maybe thicker here, and this acts as a foreground element so that you can have your main focus elsewhere. We have things like radiating lines. A lot of what Edgar Payne talks about is using flow and gestural curves to lead the eye. And that's a lot of what we want to think of composition as, in this sense, at the sketching stage. When you have radiating areas, maybe you've got a mountain, and maybe the clouds are all done in a manner where everything is pointing to our main mountain. You can be more creative with it, but that is generally one that I see often. And lastly, we have silhouette that I'm going to cover here. See on YouTube, we've got Thomas watching. Hey, buddy. Okay, so silhouette, the importance of it is you're going to want to maintain what your general sense of composition using rule of thirds. But instead of having everything in detail and using leading lines for everything, you're going to mass out a foreground area and place that into mass value. With everything in front of it being placed in, generally an appealing way. But this will become more and more important as we move on. So, those are basic rules of composition, and if anybody wants the name, this is Edgar Payne, and I believe rules of composition for landscapes. Okay. Next, I want to talk about big, medium, small, and shape grouping. Give me just a moment to look up what I need. Okay. So, a really important aspect of design is using simple shapes in complex ways. The basic shapes that we want to refer to at any given point would be the standard triangle, circle, square. But you can also have organic shapes. Things like this. I've seen these referred to as combo shapes before in a prior class. Where if you thought about applying the rules of a triangle to a square, maybe you would do something like this. Or maybe you want to square up a circle. If you're thinking three-dimensionally, you can add curves to a triangle, maybe some geometry. But at its core, we're thinking of primitives. So when we think about this, the most important part is grouping shapes within a larger one. If we want to group along a circular curve, or we want to group along a box curve, and let's see, a triangle curve. These notes are excellent, by the way. I had picked these up from a friend who took background for animation at CDA, and he was oh so kind enough to share me these notes and take them as gospel. But the cool part about this is anything that goes within this shape can be filled. So maybe you've got trees. Can also be mountains, who knows. General idea is to have one element. With everything contained within this shape, you have a sense of control and design. Same goes for this. We can fill this with an opposing shape. And in general, you've got this pleasing container for your shapes. The benefits of this is to prevent unorganized composition or chaos. Let's see. We'll fill this with some boxes. And maybe there's something of note that contrasts that shape up there. This is one of my favorite tips because you can apply this to so many different use cases. If you have your horizon line way up here and you have a bunch of perspective coming off this way, let's use a different color. What if you contained everything, and this extends in the same manner as Edgar Payne, what if you contained all of your shapes of interest in a big circle? What if you contained everything in a big triangle, and then you planned your city or your mountains or something of note within that area, right? It creates a sense of design. Starting from this large abstract point also allows for you to think in big, medium, small. So now you can use similar additional complementary shapes and it's going to feel unified with its shape language. So big, medium, small can apply in the sense where you've got big, you've got medium, and you've got smalls. It offers a natural sense of variety. And it will apply to everything. Anything can have big, medium, small applied to it, and it's a general design principle that it will be improved as a result. Let's see, what else can we do? For more creative application of the shape grouping principle, we can think about stuff like a cityscape. You got your buildings. In general, group those within a triangle, right? Maybe you're looking down on a street and now you have this triangle composition with your main point of interest somewhere along here. Maybe it's like a superhero. If you want to take it into the case of an interior, maybe you could have a flat interior and we want to contain everything within a shape. So what if we contain it within this circle shape? So now I've got this square, which is the door. Maybe there's a person in the door, and we want to have contrasting shapes to this as well. So what if we have a rounded table? Rounded monitor. Some posters. The general idea here being, if you took everything away, you're going to have a natural sense of leading line and well, I don't have any better word to say to other than to group things within one spot so that it looks intentional. If you can hear my dog, excuse us for a bit. Okay, I'm looking for more stuff. A key aspect to grouping is to avoid randomness. When you're arranging shapes, everything needs to be along a leading line or in a grouped shape. So, maybe you've got boxes. By leading it along that, you're avoiding placing things of all manner and ilk in places that don't make sense. This is not thought out, and instead you have a messy, unintentional, undesigned composition. We'll just mark that off instead. What you want to avoid is using a composition where, like, maybe you're shaping it in with a triangle, but if you only just apply a bunch of shapes and don't really think about it, add stuff in, this is still just a garble of nothing. Instead, we want to plan these through so that maybe there is a central element of a square, and we could have overlaps like this. So by doing this, and now look at me, I'm forgetting big, medium, small. So maybe if I were to fix this, I would try extending this out just a tad and thinning this one out quite a bit. Same to here, we'll shrink this down a lot. Okay, that way we were able to quickly design a more natural and varied arrangement of shapes. Okay, let's move on. Compositionally, we can think about interior spaces and general environments with lots of leading lines and paths. So you may see this in lots of different ways. This could be gesture, it could be rhythm, could be paths. The general idea here is when you are designing, you want a through line, something that we can follow that adds intentionality or believability. In one way, let's start with a path. If you've got a guy and he's on like a cliffside, what I would want to do is I would have some rocks that kind of show that there's a way to step down, and maybe there's a bunch of smaller rocks that are going to all lead. Maybe they'll spiral through so that we have overlap. Up to something of interest. Here. By implementing this, you have gesture, and you also have a way for the protagonist or character to navigate. Can be any pattern as well. But other methods that we can do are things like if you are in an interior. You want to lead things along a line. So what if you have a bunch of stuff that, what if we are taking these angles and everything that we do is going to go along it? So maybe you've got a desk here and it's casting a shadow. Then you've got a bunch of posters. As well as some sort of end table. So as to not make it look too strange, we can always find ways to make intentional design look believable. It would be casting shadow here. And then along here, maybe it's like, maybe the room is being lit in a way where we have shadow running across. So I would describe this one as a rhythm. It's a repeating motif that allows for us to score our composition in a way that leads us to something of interest. Gesture would be more like having, let's see, something like this, and maybe we just have a bunch of elements linked across it. You can always use these in any way. Think of basic shapes. So best applied in an abstract sense. Meaning you're always thinking about abstract composition or leading lines, things like this. Build with simple shapes. Which then results in intentional complexity. Okay. I see on YouTube, Kieran says that this is all very interesting and he hasn't thought about this before. Yeah, I hadn't either until I had been exposed to these class notes, and man, it's useful. It's just really, really great stuff. Next, we've got foreground, midground, and background. Let me write that better. Okay. For this one, it'll be easiest to refer to other images, so we'll do just that. And by the way, when you search for landscape photography, do not go for these oversaturated crazy images because they're using HDR photography, high dynamic range, where the cameras are exposing for both light and shadows, so you end up with these images that have limited value control in a way that we want to go for art. So not the best sorts of references to learn value from. You want to get natural images, things from maybe maybe even like tourist photos, because some of these are just way too edited to have any real value statement. Okay, let's visit ArtStation. Ooh. Have they dropped Arcane for us? Yes. Some great stuff to go for here. Okay. Alright. Well, let's use this. Okay. We're looking at Arcane right now, and I'm going to talk about foreground, midground, background. For this image, what I'm seeing are, let's break it down in the same kind of manner that we've been talking about previously. I'm seeing gestural rhythm goes like this to bring our attention to this door, which is just about in that kind of typical rule of thirds area. It's not quite, but we don't have to adhere to it that closely. Some of the stuff that I'm seeing with this is, one, we've got our foreground here in the front. Oftentimes you can supplement this with some sort of overlapping object that gets in the way of the others, just so that you have more cards about depth. But in general, this is just land. I see we've got some foreground trees, so there's some trees here blocking that off for depth. Next we've got the midground, and the midground is going to be these trees. And the background would be all this stuff back here. There's even some sort of castle thing being hinted at in the background. Now there's a video on composition done by Modern Day James. So I'll just write it here. Where he specifically shows people how to think about foreground, midground, and background. So if you were to look at something from a bird's eye view, and you have stuff like this running along it, if we were to imagine where how this scene is laid out, then we've got, let's see, start with purple. We got these trees. And now let's place that here. Ah, crap. Undo. Put that on a separate layer so we don't mess up. Okay, next we got the midground, which was a bunch of trees plus a building and we'll fit that in there somewhere. We'll make this work. Behind that we've got more trees, a shoreline, and way on in the distance you've got that castle area on its own little island in the water. So foreground, midground, background, super background, laid out like this. When you think about it this way, you can start to manipulate your foreground, midground, background, and compose things and rearrange. So maybe you design your original stuff, your original canvas, but you don't like where that is. If it's on a separate layer, you can think about moving that card around in a way that is more pleasing to you. Just a general rule of thumb, tip kind of thing. But let's visit one more. interior. So, yeah, cool. Let's go with this one, it's easier to see. Okay. In this case, there are a lot of layers here. And this is how we create depth. From a compositional standpoint, depth is created through overlap. So let's see. Apnajoy, arcane concept. We have our main element here. And if we want to be thinking about the sorts of composition that we've got, I'd say that this is leading lines for this reverse triangle here. And due to the perspective, we've got this big triangle creating this shape. And it's being counteracted by a large square. So let's make this as simple as possible and then we'll expand it out. Let's start with that. Okay. So if I squint, I'm seeing a big triangle shape with that rhythm. And then I'm seeing blocking off with this. And the focal point is really right here. So now, let's copy that. Uh-oh. Just disconnected. Let's fix that. Okay, back in business. We got this vehicle. What I want to do is just mask this out so that we can get a sense of those overlaps. It's being overlapped by everything grouped in this square shape here. He starts off with this tent, then this overhang, in front of that even is a topper for this tent, and then beyond that is building number 1, building number 2, and multiple layers of more building. Same here, we've got this building. And then for interest, we have small and medium shapes. That I would say were planned out in this pattern. But check this out. Here's the cool part. You reverse that arrow. That curve is leading exactly to the tip of that vehicle. So everything else whoa. Everything else is just there to block off any attention to the main action, which is happening right here. So again, we start off with that reverse triangle shape, which creates that gesture for our main focal point here. Every overlap that we have is a new card. And so let's deepen that just a little. Every single shape is overlapping into the next one so that we have this sense of space with a foreground, a midground, and a background here in really light tone, and then a super background with the sky. Okay, let's see, what else did I want to cover? That covers all of my ideas on composition that I wanted to go through. Next, let's talk about theme application. So, theme application. Last week we made compositions from boxes. And that looked like this. It was taking any composition, adding a vanishing point to it, and having boxes laid out. What we want to do is go over the general idea of how to establish theme, design towards a brief, and then apply the basic language of the theme onto primitives and your original placement. The benefit of starting with an abstract design is that it's easier to start off with something that is unique to you without looking at a reference. So I'm going to write that down. Bear with me, this will take some time. Benefit to beginning with abstract. It's not influenced by any other art. So, grouped shapes, rhythms, boxes, these are all building blocks for you to end up with something that you can easily design. Okay. Now we want pure ref. Control H for help. I need help. Move window, right click and drag. Okay. I don't often work on my computer, so this is a little more difficult. I'm just not used to it. Okay, so let's go for like a Western, right? When we do reference boards, we want to have different sets of inspiration. We want to have artistic inspiration, as well as real reference. So if we are thinking about a Western, maybe we pull a bunch of inspiration from things like Rango, McCree, or what's his new name? I don't know. Let's Overwatch Western level. I don't remember the name. And then for real reference, we want to look at actual late 1800s American towns in the South or the Midwest. Okay. There needs to be a clear separation between these two so that you know which part is just inspiring you and which part is actually informing you. Okay. So we are looking up stuff from Rango. Rango is such a good movie. I can't believe how well it holds up. What I'm looking for right now is stuff that piques my interest. I think I'm going to look up visual development, since visual development is basically concept art in the film world. But it's a video. And now I'll look up cowboy visual development art. I'm getting a lot of naturalistic stuff. So clearly there's like a persistent tone. The cool part about creating reference boards as well is that you don't have to just adhere to what you think that you should go for. Let's also bring in Klaus. I can't say that I'm going to be successful in the limited amount of time that I have, but there's a particular thing that I like about Klaus, and that is its shape design is just excellent. And there's some really cool stuff that we can draw from this. And we'll use this as inspiration for our lines. And now we'll look up real world reference. Am I going to get a bunch of costumes? Yeah. Type in real. Okay. We'll get there. We'll get there. Where am I? Sorry this is boring, you guys. On YouTube, you see Artsy Aki saying, "Hey Alex, hello." Hello to you. You know what? I'm gonna look up Western movies. Maybe something like True Grit. And let's put that into Google. This might be more accurate to what we actually want. I want to look up what a Western town looks like. I'm going with movies, and they are designed in a way, but a lot of movies also go for authenticity. And so if you get stuff that generally looks pretty authentic, that can be your real world reference. And now I need help again. How do I move around? Zoom to pointer, scroll wheel, pan scene, scroll, click, drag. Scroll, click, and drag. Ah, got it. Okay, and then how do I add a title? Open menu, right click. We want to add a note. So Artsy's asking if this is happening elsewhere. It is. I am streaming on Discord where people will be able to message and ask questions. You can also do that from there, but if you want to speak to me directly, you can. The Discord links are found in other YouTube videos, so sorry if it's not on this one. Oh, nice. Westworld is a good recommendation. But there's so I've got some for now that I'm gonna roll with. Expand this out. Okay, so let's pull out Epic Pen. See if this works. Okay. What I like about the references for Klaus are the shape design. And I think that we can roll with this idea of having these really exaggerated shapes. Why is this not drawing now? Oh, it doesn't want me to draw in Pure Riff. I know that there's a way to fix that. Let's see. Enable transparent to mouse, enable overlay. Okay, Control T to enable that or disable that. The cool thing about all this is really exaggerated, wonky shapes. Now, Westerns are filled with a lot of squares, a lot of basic stuff. Okay, this might not work out as well as I intended. I apologize. I'll just draw it on the side with my iPad. And then Rango has a lot of detail and some fun stylization with characters. But the reason I like to use Rango as an example is that you look at this, that is a great Western and winter kind of thing. And it's being accented by this late industrial line, this mass of trees, and then we've got this shape. Small shapes. Look at that, that exactly mirrors what we were trying to show earlier. It's got a path. And so this has excellent use of shapes. The shapes are on point. I'm not going to keep this in the notes, but it's excellent use. And so I want to make use of the shape design as well as the exaggerated exteriors, really tall, really wonky, all of that. And apply it to real reference with things like this. So let's do that. What I want to do is basically, let's talk about, this one works for me. How about you guys? I'm going to redraw this. Let's scale it up. For people who are in the chat, feel free to talk now, because we're getting to a point where me filling the space is more difficult. So, because I'm going to be drawing and kind of focusing on something harder than explaining. With the original assignment, it was start with boxes, but now we want to apply theme. I want to try to go for an animation idea, so I'm going to make a bit more of a lengthy process. Let me take this off the page. PureRef is always on top, so I couldn't disable this pen. Okay. Now we've got these buildings, and if I were to look at them from an orthographic view, I think it might look like this. This was a really good find for this reference because I already see some opportunities for good exaggeration in the design using the principles that we've talked about earlier. And then there's another set of buildings here in the back that goes the other way. Now, what I want to do is take that original statement and exaggerate it. I don't need the original. Okay. When going for a style similar to Rango or Klaus, which is our artistic inspiration, you can see that there's a lot of wonk. Buildings have curves. Buildings are tilted to the sides some. And they're simplified down. Planks of boards are never straight. What else can we see? General tops of buildings are off kilter. We've got what I would consider mostly simple shapes. So if we've got a building like this, then there's a window and it's a circle. This is just a triangle. Don't have to think about it any harder than primitives arranged in wonky ways. And I want to use that. Okay, so I've got my drawn reference here. And I'm going to try and emulate Klaus' style with Western inspiration. And we'll see how this goes. I'm not saying that I am a pro animation style designer, but we will try stuff. What I've seen before is filling negative space, and I'm also seeing this triangle design that we can play into. So if I want to have, I'll give it some extra room here, but I want to have all my buildings grouped within this shape. Let's talk about how we can take that and put it here. So, I've got this big shape. I want to fill the negative space, so now we've got something big, corner to corner. I might make the center one the largest. This will allow us to get this medium shape here. And maybe this is leaning this way to kind of offset the idea of the original angle. And then finally we'll come down here with a smaller building. And I'm going to tilt it the opposite direction of what it appears to be tilting in the reference, because it kind of has these two leading lines that can lead to this centered building. Okay, so before I get into detailing this out, I'm going to revise my big, medium, and small shapes, because we're still in the abstract stage right now, and that allows us the opportunity to easily manipulate and change things. So I've since decided that this is a good opportunity for the main idea. I want to stretch this out, but keep it in our group. Then this building can still stay here, but we're going to thin it some. And make it taller. Now this guy, oops, wrong layer. Okay, good. So what I'm doing here is revising the shape so that I have this big, this feels like a medium, and this is a small building off to the side. And in general, I wanted to keep door shapes at a similar scale. And now we can go into detailing. So when you look at this from the outside in, we've got this kind of triangle idea. To keep that going, I want to offset this building like so. we can shrink this together as well. Make that space smaller than the other. No sense of evenness when we're looking at Klaus. Okay. So what I'm seeing to the left, or to the right on the screen here with our real reference is, for the center building, the part that's on top is smaller than the building itself, and it's got this sign that's a little wonky. I'm going to make it big because this is animation we're going for. Artsy is asking if it is always better to start with the front view. In the case of me trying to design for animation, it's pretty difficult to get these wonky designs when you're drawing into, let's find it. When you're drawing into boxes in perspective here, like in the scene that we're referencing. In order to address that, I'm going to be designing it in profile. That way I can get all of the intentional design and the grouping and the shapes, and then it will be as simple as dragging that into perspective so that we can work with it from there. But right now I'm purely thinking off of a design point of view, which we can then take into the sketch that we created as the bare bones. It is not enough for this to be so small. Right now I'm thinking of some notes that I had seen from Will Weston, and Will Weston is a long time guy in the animation industry, and one of the biggest things I had seen from him is this idea that animation is a joke. So when you think about animation, it's all about exaggeration. Exaggeration, things that make a laugh, things that don't quite make sense, but we can do that because we are drawing it all. So at the bottom, underneath, we see that there's a bunch of slats from that overhang. We've got a post. I'll make that slightly off kilter. Underneath it, it's got, let's see. We'll follow this rhythm. Keep that. Artsy on YouTube also asking, when you're planning for buildings, do you also plan for a city path from the top view and then design each building? You could. You certainly could. I think once you start thinking like that, it's a little too like engineering. But that's not to stop you either. You could certainly go for it. But usually in visual development and animation, there are some very specific areas that you want to design. And so that might have just one street view that you need to design for, and then it's not really an issue from there. Okay, we still have windows that I'm missing. Those windows are here. So check this out. With I just so happened to have the reverse negative space. That's fine. This can still be a window, but I'm going to erase out, maybe make them a little smaller. Dang it, this pencil, man. I don't know why it's acting up like that. So I'm seeing that the cross is a little bit higher up. If we want to add some stability, we can still have that go down, maybe? Because this door will as well. I will once again remind everybody that I am flying by the seat of my pants, so this is something that I'm not generally as versed in with animation design, but it's a good opportunity to cover it, explain my thoughts to others. And I'm going to design these toppers. Okay, so I'm seeing 1, 2, then we'll leave that last one bigger. I'm seeing these overhead, what are these called? They support the weight. For people who are in the Discord, do you have any questions for me so far? Sounds like a no.
I got one, Alex. I got one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. It's related to reference picking. Which are the parameters you use to pick your reference in terms of, I mean, you're looking for shapes or quality or color palette, or what are your parameters?
Sure, yeah. What I was taught was for artistic reference, you should be inspired by anything that you want. Anything that inspires you can go in that artistic mood board. The value behind that is for you to identify stuff that interests you, that is not too close to your idea, right? So if you want to design a Western, well, you might, that's what the real reference is for. You have what the Western actually looks like, but then when you want to influence it and find something new, you're going to take stuff that is not necessarily related, as well as some, and you can take the stuff that you like. So hey, I really like the green color here, and the way that all of these shapes are super ultra simplified down to squares and circles. I really like that. But here, I really like that it's not the ultra realism that I'm interested in, it's the exaggeration of features. Everything's at an angle, everything's at a wonk. So for that point, I'm looking at that reference and taking note of that idea so that I can apply it into my project. And so that way you can have a good balance of the stuff that you want to be similar to, but not copying from, creating in a mixing to create an original idea with something that exists, which is why we have a real reference here. Does that answer, Matthias?
Yeah, 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 for sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's zoom back in. Looks like I got this slightly wrong. This is going to be extended here. Because that's just wall. Here I'm seeing this like shanty, big black space. Artsy's asking who my mentor was when I was learning, and I've taken some classes, and I've been taking classes at Brainstorm, environment sketching with Kason Lam, and also environment design with Kenny Vo. I love the both of them. I've taken classes with Tyler Edlin. I've mentored under Antonio Steparts with ArtWad. And every time, you learn something new every time. Can't quite see the finish of the doors, so I'm kind of just making these up. For this one, I want to bring in the supports closer to the door so that we can see more of this window. And since everything needs a big, medium, and small, let's bring this down and let's shrink it so it's thinner, but still the same, almost the same height as the others. This one can be shrunk down because what I wanted to think of here is this through line, this gesture, like that. And so I'm going to look through all of my facades here and think about how I can take this kind of idea and link everything along that. Let's try. I want to lead up to this. Yeah, let's go with that. Artsy's asking on YouTube, when I break down shapes for a theme out of reference, how am I usually noting that specific theme and reminding of that theme later? Unique shapes to a unique theme. Well, let's see if I can grasp what you're getting at. And I think that's like, how do you know what kind of shapes to use in a style? So like if I'm going for this Western theme and I'm designing a style to it, how do I know what shapes I should continue to use? Well, I've made the decision early on that I wanted to group everything within this triangle idea. Within that, I wanted to do a collection of wonky squares. When you make wonky squares, you can just play off of a negative space that you start with from each one. So you can do this, then you can purposefully alter it, and then the inside is a funny reverse triangle shape, and you can just kind of continue to go off of that and then design it in big, medium, small shapes. But in general, I'm thinking of squares because Western setting doesn't have a lot of circles or triangles used. It's a lot of wooden planks, squares, broken down, old, wonky. So you can really work with that. Okay, I don't want to get too crazy or else it just doesn't make sense. Then windows here. Okay, we're getting close. Let's zoom in just a little more. Make sure that's visible. Artsy asks in response to my recent answer, so I am looking for, he's asking, so you look for whether scene has a blocky or curved or round shape to remember the theme? You can, but it's also up to you. You know, like what if you made a Western with curved shapes? Would it, that's something to explore. Would it still look like a Western? Would it make it more of a sci-fi Western idea? It's, you know, shapes have logic to them, things that we associate. And we associate blocky shapes with Westerns, so that's what I'm going for. But maybe you wanted to go for a sci-fi Western or some sort of egalitarian utopian society that has a lot of influence from cowboys. You can do that if you wanted to. And then you could change it up and be circles. I don't know. Sorry if you hear my dog. We've got a new foster coming in, so there's a lot of noise. They get excited with each other. We are almost done, you guys, with this design. I think I'm going to add some barrels here just because this feels wrong. Okay. Right now I'm just filling in some darker shapes, getting those details in so that we can have a nice semi-finished idea. Okay, how about that, you guys? Artsy's asking about my dogs. Do I make fosters wear diapers in their new homes? Sometimes we do if we have puppies, but we've only had to do that once when it really just was out of control. Otherwise, we use puppy pads, and that works out generally pretty okay. Okay, so we went from this original design, which was based in reality, and we applied themes of Klaus, design to it. So let's merge these. So I've got that. And now I want to pick out my design, copy it, and let's find that original composition. So with the transform tool, we can take our original stuff and work it in. Okay. So you'll see that this doesn't actually fully work. So what I'm going to do now is take anything that's not, I'm going to start projecting things into 3D space. That's a better summary. Okay. Cut and paste. Let's move these back. And I'll use a mask to eliminate overlapping details. Now I can draw this stuff. Let's see. Now with the perspective we have, we can pull this back some. because this is only just a facade wall. Then this will come back just a tad. Hopefully you guys can see this coming together. Okay. Merge these down, and then, just for sake of clarity, I'll do a final little outline pass. Sounds like my dogs are having fun. Oh, lost connection. Let's get back. Okay. to finish it off, let's just check this out and put in a rough idea. We'll shrink this down because it's not quite the proper size. But we'll do that later. We're almost there. Okay, the original frame. Then I'm going to I think I'm on the wrong layer. Okay. Lastly, we might finish that off with just some general line work. So we've got stuff here, we got stuff here. We got shrubs. There's this one foreground element. Looks like a pipe. Use lots of small elements. I'm adding a bunch of footsteps here because I'm thinking about pathing. I'm going to think about wheels that normally drive through this path, through this main street. So maybe there's a lot of treading.
There also need to be like the tumbleweed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a ball, just moving and scribbles.
It's not Western without tumbleweed.
Absolutely. So we are really, really close. We're almost there. I'm just going to highlight or outline the silhouette so that it's more clear. Okay. And let's finish it off with, I like this dry goods to kind of be a focus, but I also forgot about this saloon, which makes more sense to be a thing that we're looking at. So maybe we've got some clouds that are going to be swooping in like so. We can take a tip from the composition we had seen earlier in Arcane, which was having everything block off so that only this area was was mainly in focus. So let's try that. Let's try a cloud. How much sense is it going to make to have a cloud that looks like this? Not much, right? It's too big. I'll go with the sweeping lines again. There we go. We've got a full scene. Roughly drawn, but that is how we can go from an original block out to details. So let's wrap that up. That was the full scene. Here are our designs. And for the sake of finishing my notes, I'll just add this back in. So we went from an original boxed scene, which if you're drawing through, you might be imagining it like so, with a box. But in general, that's what we went with. We took the original box scene and we implemented a design. We did so by taking the original idea and exaggerating what was there. We had boxes. It had this slight angle. It had a slight angle so that I thought, hey, that could really work with a triangle idea. And then for the design idea, we really exaggerated that and then went with Klaus style wonk. Klaus style wonk. Which you can draw that into the full scene and into the boxes that we have. And using all of our ideas of composition, we can end up with a final shot. All in the span of an hour. At least I hope so. And I hope that was engaging. So that's all of my lecture for today. That's the demo. In terms of homework, let's pull that up. Got on the side here. Okay, so homework would be to take 15 of last week's sketches and detail them out to theme. So you can pick a theme of your choice. You can do 15 all one theme, or you can divide it so 2 themes. You will also be creating your reference boards. And you need 2 separate boards. Artistic inspiration and real reference. With artistic inspiration, anything that inspires you. It's not just according to theme. Find stuff that's different. Redline, break down, and take note of the stuff that you like and implement that. Okay. With the real reference, we want to find informative, descriptive photos. You want authenticity. You want props. You want real time period. Real composition, so that you know how to break it. We want to know what an actual Western town looks like, in other words. Don't just don't apply a city to a Western town. If your sketches from last week don't work or you're not happy with them, it is okay to make new ones. But don't look at reference when you draw them. Reference. What is the word? With reference holding you down. We want you to compose. Okay, that is the homework. I have 40 minutes left to go over previous homework, so I will do what I can. Let me see if there's anything I've missed. Okay, guys, for anybody in the Discord, feel free to talk now. Let's go in order of submission. We had Alexander, who submitted first. Let's get rid of all this stuff. All right. So Alexander, you did the perspective breakdowns and you did the 30 sketches in different perspectives. Awesome. So in general, I'll look for anything that doesn't look correct. I guess is the way that we can approach this, since there's a lot to go through. We've got 2-point perspective breakdowns, and you have the horizon line set up here. I would say that this is correct. The ships are all leading in that right vanishing point. That works for me. I think this is especially cool, Alexander, how you guessed the lens type, which is ultra high level move. Let's see. We got leading lines from these lights, and you can see some stuff from the background there. Yeah, makes sense to me. It's a wide lens, which you can tell from, I'm going to guess, convergence like this a little bit, which you're also there, so really tight convergence like that implies a wide lens because you're fitting more into a scene. It's not flat. You can see a lot for people who are not used to lens types. We've got leading lines. Nice. Really wide angle lens because we're seeing really strong convergence going this way. A wide lens implies that the vanishing points are almost closer to being within the frame of the camera. The closer that vanishing points get to the camera, the more you can fit in. So now that city building on a corner has that really sharp angle you can fit in tons of stuff here. That implies that what you're seeing is wide. So the closer together your vanishing points, the wider the lens. If you want a long lens, you're going to really bring out those vanishing points so that when things are going back, it's more silhouette based, and you're not going to fit in as much unless you really, really back up physically with a camera. And so I think Alexander had mentioned to me that he has experience with photography, so he's used to those effects. Good point, Alexander. A lot of these buildings are rotated slightly differently, so it's going to be really difficult to place what the actual, well, not what the actual, but if there was a main 3-point perspective grid, it's not applying to it. Instead, you do have the general idea of there being a horizon line somewhere over here with the third vanishing point. And because it's so low, look what it allows for you to get. You can purely design through silhouette. From a concept art point of view, if you were to take this idea and had your horizon line way down below the canvas and you're mostly just looking up, all that becomes playing with shape. If you understand your rules of perspective, then you can go in and you can design your foreground, midground, and background with the compositional rules that we talked about. And you can work in that scene without actually having to mess with perspective. It's pretty nice. You don't want to over rely on that, but that is one of the big benefits of a low horizon line. Oh wow, so this is cool, Alexander. So you say longer lens, and I almost thought that this would be a wide lens first because of how it feels almost like a fisheye view. Like we've got him, and then we've got all of this space that's wrapping around. So that's kind of my take on it. But then I also see how like these trees feel really flat in comparison. And so
Yeah,
you
I think you
could,
might be right, Alex. I mean, it's quite distorted as well, isn't it? So you kind of might be feeling it's a kind of longer lens, but I didn't know if that was just like the aspect ratio of the camera or.
right, me either, because I totally see what you see also, where this background feels flattened out, and we've got
Yeah, and
this
if
card aspect.
you kind of
So
feel like you're spying on Frodo a little bit, so you're kind of in the distance, it kind of feels like that.
right, that's a cool shot. That's a hard one.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it?
Slight 3-point for sure. Steep, yeah, absolutely. The horizon line is somewhere way up here with a long lens because your vanishing point is so far out. Nice. This is a good learning opportunity. You picked really good ones for other people. 1-point perspective. The vanishing point is lined up with the point of interest. This is a great example of a long lens. It's almost like the card system that we talked about for foreground, midground, background. There's no crazy distortion. It's natural perspective with flattened out so that you're not worrying about perspective too much. Cool. Nice, Alexander. This is awesome. Great job.
Is yeah. I didn't realize like how much 1-point perspective was used because I've had loads of these film cards on my like a folder somewhere for ages, and
Yeah,
I was reusing them for this. I didn't realize how many were like 1-point perspective and how often that's used really.
it's really
So I thought that was
surprising.
interesting.
It's definitely really surprising because you kind of think, oh, I need it to be extravagant and concept arty, but for film, it's often like, what is our subject matter? What do we want to look at? And as a result, the way you're pointing the camera ends up with things being in 1-point really often. So
Yeah.
Getting creative with how to use that is definitely a key skill to have. Oh, Rafi had the same takeaway too, just how often 1 point was used. Okay. I'm looking at stuff. Basically, I don't know if there's much to critique here because we're using basic boxes and that it's more like testing your ability to be comfortable with overlaps, creating depth, and we hadn't gotten into composition yet. So let me read what Rafi said. He was looking at screengrab.com and images from movies, and like 30% of them are in 1 point. Yeah, it is really cool. Especially when
Oh wow, that is interesting.
When you go to, I'll type it in the Discord too. So animation screen caps, I think that's, or you can Google that name and find it. But when you look through animation stuff, so much of it is in 1 point or really graphical compositions. Thank you, Rafi. Okay. I like that you experimented. Like, what happens when you change this angle? Nice. Using 1 point to look down. This is a good one to make note of. So 1 point doesn't just have to be the tunnel composition, where you're looking at something and you see a thing on the other side. You can be looking straight up, straight down. It's basically the summarization of looking in an exact 90-degree angle any direction. And by doing so, you have this really cool top-down cityscape perspective. You could even imagine like Spider-Man coming, he's, some crazy foreshortening with his body like this and his head, and maybe he's got one hand like this and the other hand is all the way down here. You could imagine Spider-Man falling down in the cities like so.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. Actually, that's a really cool idea. Like when I did that one, number 9, I was thinking of like a spaceship flying away, and now
Yeah.
you've looked at it because it's so simplified. You can make what you want out of it, can't you? And that's what's so cool and powerful about this idea.
How awesome is that, right? I know.
Yeah.
It was mind-blowing to me too. That like, don't overcomplicate it. Start abstract, start with the block out, because then you can just imagine ways to theme everything out. So yeah, it's very powerful.
Yeah, you come with like a fresh pair of eyes, and yeah, it looks like something completely different.
Let's see. Cool. Experimenting with long lens, experimenting with super wide lens. See, that's the exact example that I used on the last screen. And nice. Good job. Oh, cool. Starting to experiment with objects. And this one's a cool one. This one, I'm not sure if there's an exact reference, but it makes me think of Mitchell's versus Machines. And I imagine, like, if you were to revise this shot, you could have specific lines of these ships all really massing in, so you get that a really good sense of depth, and then the ones far away are super small, so you could play into that. And then it looks like this organized, I don't know, matrixy taking over kind of idea. And then we got 3-point. Very cool. So in the way that 1-point can be looking straight down, you can also naturalize it. So instead of it looking straight up and just having buildings that go in like this, if you wanted to tilt that up so that it's more 3-point perspective, this would be the way to do it. So imagine a horizon line down here. You've got one vanishing point this way and the other one this way, but you're still looking up into the sky. For anybody who's not used to that kind of shot, Alexander did a great job. Oh, this one would be cool. I don't know what you would make with it, but definitely feels like an aerial looking up sort of thing, and or this could be like a mountainside, and you have some like interesting collection of boxes and houses. Could be some sort of like collection of ships, frigates. You can, if you add in some really small shapes, you can get some really crazy depth out of this and make it look like a Star Wars fleet if you wanted to. Yeah. Okay, that's all I got, Alexander. Great job.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate that.
Okay, Matthias. Raphael, make sure if I don't get to you by the end of this session, because I've got to go deal with some getting my passport set up at 11, which is in 25 minutes. I will make sure to record and take notes for you. So, okay, natural perspective. I have one thing that I wasn't sure about when I looked is my guess is that this horizon line is maybe it's not, you know, like up here, but I do think it's higher than what we have. My reason is, one, we've got this guy and it's pretty flat, so it comes out like this, and two, it feels like we're really seeing the whole top side of this area for that guy. And so I would probably raise, I think that this is raised higher, and then the hill just makes it a little confusing. But you know, it's all like, I'm not totally sure, so it could go anyway. Then cool, using photos, so that's a good way to assess how 1 point works also. And you can do a lot with this. Like, if you were to use this scene, you know, that's the Beatles cover right there, walking. Or you can have people, a cat, whatever you want. So, very nice. Oh yeah, this is a tough one.
Yeah,
you just
man,
have
it
to
was
zoom in more. Who's this artist? Do you remember? I like this.
Yeah, it's Luck Do.
Oh, okay. That's really cool, mixing the anime style with the super painterly stuff.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it. It's
Oh man,
hair art.
check this out too. Since we've been talking about composition, look how this composition is this triangle, and look how the foreground elements have been grouped into this triangle. Then we have this shape here. Everything is grouped within that, complemented by shapes that go against that grain. Then when the clouds fit in perfectly because they are just complementing what's there, with the main focus, they're still acting like negative space and just being opposite curves of the original curve. So that's really a great example of grouping, because we have, not only do we have this main triangle idea, but this triangle idea. So it's not random is is the point I'm trying to get at.
I mean, when you told about about the shape grouping inside a bigger shape, it was like mind blowing.
I know, right?
Yeah, it's what the fuck.
I know, it's so helpful. It's especially, check that out. So you've got this, but hey, I mean, you can put another main shape in there and control everything so that it never leaves those boundaries. And it's just, I don't know. It's so effective. It works really well. I know this guy. This is G. Liulian.
Yeah.
And I don't know how he does this without 3D. I hope it's with 3D, because otherwise it's just insane. But yeah, I mean, like, everything he does is in 3-point. Nice, Matthias. I agree. Yep, for sure. So this is 1 point. This is cool. This one, now that we covered, what's it called? The Steelyard composition, where it's you have to balance something on a weight by having it over here. Now you can kind of implement that. I would have, we've got this big shape. Maybe you'd have a medium as well. Balancing. Ah, nice. I like this. That's creative. This feels sci-fi right here. Something about circle shapes and everything following that rhythm, which was a nice move. Good job. I always feel like, I guess it's because it's so designed that it makes it feel man-made, and so you get that sense of science fiction to it. So that's how, for anybody who wants to go science fiction, big, medium, small, it can still apply. Like when you've got Star Wars ships, you still got this big shape, you still got a medium, you still got small stuff, but then everything within it is so refined and calculated, following that original man-made shape, which is what makes this work. Since it's a circle and you have symmetrical same shape stuff, it will create that feeling. Good job. I'm happy to see you guys experiment with I don't know why I drew B. I'm happy to see that you guys are experimenting. Oh, I missed it. Artsy was asking, what does it mean to have convex and concave shapes in composition? So if you were asking that when I was doing this, that was purely because earlier in the lecture, I'm not sure if you had made it in, I was talking about the value of grouping shapes so that anything within the original group, from an abstract point of view, should be contained to it so that things look intentional, things look designed. It allows for you to place things wherever you want, and play more with like the idea of how things are going to feel and how things lead the eye, rather than getting caught up in drawing aimlessly. And so convex shapes or concave shapes, I mean, that would be more like a bowl or something like that. But you could, in the use of composition, if you wanted to, I mean, you could do this, and that would be totally adequate. So now everything that you draw in here can be contained to that original shape, and maybe you want to keep that original group, and that's a tree, and now this is a huge lake with a circle composition. You can work with that. So it's the magic about it, especially for someone like me who gets really caught up in the mechanics of drawing, and I struggled to draw something new. That was really uncharacteristic for me, but it was easy at the same time, right? Because all I did was focus on abstract shapes, use other shapes. I don't have to necessarily worry about what they are. If I want a cityscape, then sure, yeah, I can use blocks, but if I want it to be aliens, then let's try something alien or something different. Then let's try this. What do we get when we use circles? What do we get if we subdivide this even more? We get something strange. So coming up with an idea suddenly becomes really, really simple. That's the value of working abstractly. Okay. 2 point. If you use these next week, Matthias, for your homework, the main thing would be just establishing like a horizon line. That's all.
All right.
For some of them, I'm sure you would. It's like I fully trust you to add that in. That's all. That way you get the sense of the space. I remember once Kenny in WB2, he called me out because I had some sort of scene where I had this like cliff and then an ocean. And he's like, hey man, that doesn't make sense. The world doesn't just end. So he's like, add some extra land or some extra stuff that gives you the impression that there's still something behind the main idea. So that was what I saw here was, whoops. Without any anchor in the background, you're not entirely sure of where things are going. So if you do this, maybe you can have some really small shapes down here to show that this is in the air. And cityscape, I don't know. Could be something.
Like immediately it looks more grounded.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe this is a crane, right? Like a construction thing, and it's and then that's, you know, smokestacks. There could be a billboard here. A lot of windows. And then you got a scene. Look at that.
Nice.
Okay, cool, Matthias. That's all I got. Until we get to next week, I'd say awesome. Good job practicing. And the main idea is for these to be like push-ups. We're working out and getting used to what it feels like to draw in perspective and draw things that can turn into compositions. Okay, Rafi. I think I may not cover the week 1 homework as much, but let's go over some. Main point that I would have to touch on would be, I like that you included the underside here, but unless this was looking up more, or if it is looking up like that much, let's see. Then let's think about the primitive here. And then we might have the underside more like this. I think just what I'm seeing is it's probably this. It's probably this really shallow convergence that makes it look out of perspective. To fix that, I would probably bring that angle in more. And then just flatten that out a tad. Let's see. And then I think I see that you're being mindful of adding detail in shadow or transition points. I think we can work on the transition. So we start off a little looser, and then it gets more and more congested as you round that transition. So maybe there's just a fluff there, fluff there. and also the whole idea of big, medium, small. This is not like any crazy critique, just always remembering it's taken me years, actual years, to even figure out the idea of big, medium, small, and I have to remind myself every time. So large, small edges, that natural variance is going to add a lot of appeal and interest. Same here, like, so this one we can either shrink this one down and then go like that, have a little bit more of a taper. Then this one can be extended outwards. Cool. It's this sort of idea where you get this repetitive rhythm and they're all evenly spaced as well. That is difficult to spot while you're drawing, but we want to look at that and make sure that we are trying to vary those strokes and the spacing. Cool. Good job. Good thinking on the geometry here. Every time you make a new corner point, that becomes another plane that you can work with. So the more complex the silhouette, the more complex your geometry is going to have to be. Oh, excuse me.
I need to be out the door in 10 minutes.
I understand. Okay. I've got to quit soon. Ultra simplification. We got triangles, circles, squares. Nice. This is good. With the square simplification for your cloud, you can even eliminate any curve. So now you got this. Just like that. It can be a cloud as long as it's drawn or painted that way. The triangle, yeah, I think it'd be harder to really sell a pointy triangle. So as long as you've got that profile, that's a good idea. That works. I like how you did these rocks. This is good. The square, maybe a little less so. I would think, at least from like a animation implementation. What if you had, you know, your horizon line, and I imagine a rock like this, maybe just a little bit of variation here and there, and ultra simplified, it'd be very blocky rather than introducing cut angles. But that's just a note on how to simplify down to that degree. Excellent job. I dig it. Like, that's a cool tree design. If you took that to an animation style and you said, okay, here's how I propose we define 3 different levels with unique takes. Like, that's a very good way to separate them. This is cool. I like that you did big, medium, small. So good job, Rafi. This is great. This looks like good practice to me. I don't necessarily have notes in my limited time left. Okay, so you're taking notes like I demonstrated, and we got a sphere, we got the cylinder, and then remixing it into something new. Good job. Okay. We got 1 point. Oh, from Monk. I haven't seen that. 2 point. Looks right to me. 3 point for sure. This is good. Good job. So now with the new lecture that we did on grouping, the next time if you want to practice this in the future, you can think even more about this grouped shape and think about what you would do if you were to contain your trees to this shape, which, you know, is no real critique on the work that you did because we only covered that today. So it's something that will be useful and I think really goes a long way to kind of making that step towards intentional composition or even style. So you can choose to go against it for a more realistic take. I'm kind of doing a lot of talking about animation design or just design in general for more concepty stuff rather than naturalistic, which is what that was. So bad take on my part. In terms of line work, I think you can tighten up some of these things. I get it that it's sketchy too, so don't worry. But we can... I like to see really solid silhouettes, and then internal line work can get scratchier. I think that's a good way to handle it. 1 point, 1 point. Nice, you picked a Western too. Yeah, like how cool is that they all feel really different, but they're all using 1 point. 2 point perspective. Oh, thanks for pulling this out to the side too. Did that help you visualize it a little better? It does feel
Yeah, it did.
cool. Whoa. Nice, okay. So looking down at this room, I agree with that. We got we got leading lines for that 3 point. Dang, we got some scale here, man. That's awesome. So we've got that foreground element, and there's what, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers, and then it could even be going back to 7. That's how you get some scale, man. So check out how this shape is so big, it takes up half the canvas. But it feels so dense because of how many layers of small things get introduced. So when you're drawing your scenes with your boxes and stuff, just think, I could probably fit another thing back there. I could fit another thing. And that's the way to get those really dense small scenes. Or epic. Yep. I got 3 minutes left. Let's blitz this. 2 point. Oh, I like that you guys both came up with airplanes. That's cool. That works for me. This is a 3 point. But one thing I see here is this guy kind of feels out of perspective, which would be because he's not quite following the vanishing point. So if you've got a guy, he'd have to be standing like this. And then you gotta like experiment with how that would work in scene. So if you were having trouble, since they're sand dunes, you might box them off first and then curve them out so that they match. Maybe it's because of the long or the relatively high horizon line. If you lower that down so that there's less like seeing the ground floor and more of looking at them as cards. Maybe that helps the feeling of it. Cool. Nice. Good practice. Good experimenting. And this is 1 point? Okay, cool. Yeah, I like that you were trying out scenes even. So you got different ideas. You've got leading the eye to that vanishing point. Looking straight down. I approve. Great job.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, so I've got to wrap it up there. But I really appreciate you all sticking with me this long. I'm going to hang up, and I will post all of these notes in the Discord, like usual. That is the homework for next session. So, appreciate it. I'm going to hang up. So, bye-bye.
Nice. Cheers, Alex.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.